Up next is The Nature of the Wild, a program for the glory of God, in which we explore the remarkable forms of nature that surround us. For God did not create man alone. In fact, He created him last. The Bible tells us that during the week of creation, before forming man from the dust of the earth, God first filled the world with a vast array of living creatures. Vegetation, fish, birds, and beasts of every kind. And God saw that every creature He had made was good. And He blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply." Man was created last, and for a purpose. As it is written in Genesis 2:15, "Then the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to tend and keep it." Through wildlife documentaries rooted in Scripture, this program is designed to awaken in every viewer an enduring love for the natural world as the beautiful handiwork of God. Appreciate it as God did. Today we go back to the very beginning, to the week when God spoke and the world came alive. We will read together from the book of Genesis, chapter 1. And as we read, we will watch His words unfold before our eyes. Let's us turn to our Bibles and read together, or just sit and listen. The book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 3 to 5. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. Then God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters He called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the third day. The land appeared, the green came, and God looked at what He had made and called it good. The creatures of water and air. Genesis 1:20-23. Fish and birds. Then God said, "Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens." So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters abounded, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas." And let birds multiply on the earth. So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. He blessed them. God blessed them and commanded them to multiply, and they obeyed. Today, in every ecosystem across Uganda and beyond, that ancient blessing endures. In the flash of wings above a papyrus swamp, in the chorus rising from a forest at dawn, every bird in flight, every song carried on the wind, is an act of worship and praise to the Creator. Then God spoke again. The same voice that had gathered the oceans, raised the mountains, and set the rivers in motion, now turned its attention to the living world. Let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind. And the earth, faithful as it had always been, obeyed. From the ancient soils of what we now call Uganda, life answered the call in astonishing abundance. The elephants came first, or so it seems when you watch them move, for there is something primordial in their bearing. The cattle came too, in all their varieties, the long-horned Ankole among them, whose sweeping horns have become one of Uganda's most recognizable symbols. A creature so regal in appearance that to see one standing against a western Uganda sunset is to understand something about beauty that no classroom can teach. Then the reptiles, patient, ancient, unhurried. Lizards of every color darted across sun-warmed rock. Chameleons, those remarkable creatures of shifting color and swiveling eye, moved through the forest with a stillness that borders on invisibility, as though they were present at creation and learned early the art of watchful silence. Each one a testament to God's willingness to create forms that challenge human comfort, yet serve purposes woven deep into the fabric of the ecosystem. And then the great beasts, buffalo in their thousands, moving across the floodplains like a dark, slow tide. Lions stretched in the shade of acacia trees, the savanna heat pressing down around them. Zebras, their black and white geometry so precise it seems almost designed by a careful hand, which of course it was. Impala, leaping through the open grassland with an effortless elegance that makes the act of running look like worship. God looked at all of it, and then he blessed them. "Be fruitful," he said, "multiply." And they did. And in Uganda's protected parks and reserves, by God's grace and human stewardship, they continue to do so to this day. God also crowned the forests with primates, creatures of remarkable intelligence and grace. In the misty highlands of Ungahinga, the golden monkey moves through bamboo thickets in flashes of vivid amber and black. Among the ancient Hagenia trees of Bwindi and the brooding volcanic slopes of Kisoro, the mountain gorilla reigns, gentle, powerful, and achingly human in gaze. In the deep rainforests, the chimpanzee calls out with startling familiarity, and in the shadowed mid-story canopy, the lowest monkey watches in silence. Every one of them a testament that this forest was made with purpose and intention. But let us step back to the moment when God spoke the words recorded in Genesis 1:9. Let the water under the heavens be gathered into one place. The earth had no choice but to obey, and to this day, water still answers that ancient command, collecting from every corner of the land, from every continent, flowing steadily toward its appointed gathering place, the sea, the ocean. In Uganda, we witness this obedience written across the landscape. From the heights of Mount Elgon in the east, an ancient extinct volcano straddling the border of Uganda and Kenya, and one of the largest volcanic bases on the African continent, every drop of water was commanded to be released. The mountain did not withhold a single stream. From its mist-covered peaks and moorlands, water pushes downward with quiet, tireless purpose, gathering force through dense montane forest before bursting into the open as spectacular waterfalls. It forms rivers like the Manafwa to the south and the Sipi to the northwest. The Manafwa River begins its life quietly, almost imperceptibly, in the high montane zone of Mount Elgon, born from the slow seepage of glacial melt and rainfall collected in the mountain's vast caldera, the largest intact caldera in the world. At altitude, it is little more than a whisper of water threading through tussock grass and ancient Hagenia woodland, where the air is thin and cold, and the silence is broken only by birdsong and the distant sound of wind moving across the moorlands. But the mountain is generous, and the Manafwa does not remain small for long. As it descends through the middle slopes, the river gathers strength, fed by countless tributaries draining the steep forested ridges on Elgon's southern and southwestern flanks, and the Sipi to the northwest, the Sipi itself descending in 3 dramatic tiers through the slopes of the Kapchowa Escarpment, a site that has drawn travelers from across the world to stand at its edge in silent wonder. The Sipi Falls are among Uganda's most beloved natural landmarks. The uppermost fall, the tallest of the 3, plunges nearly 100 meters in a single, unbroken curtain of white water, crashing into a pool below. Below the falls, the rivers push on, joining tributaries, widening across the lowlands of eastern Uganda, eventually finding the Great Lake Kyoga before continuing their obedient march northward through the Nile toward the sea. Mount Elgon releases, and the waters go. They have always gone. Since the morning of creation, they have known no other direction. In western Uganda, mighty Mount Rwenzori, tall as it stands, had equally to obey. This is no ordinary mountain. Rising to 5,109 meters at its highest point, the Rwenzori is a block mountain, thrust upward by ancient tectonic forces over millions of years, its peaks perpetually shrouded in cloud and mist. It is this veil of moisture, drawn from the Congo Basin and the Great Lakes below, that feeds its glaciers, its bogs, its rivers, and its waterfalls in an unbroken cycle of release and renewal. The ancient Greek geographer Ptolemy called this range the Mountains of the Moon. The Rwenzori is indeed one of the Nile's great contributors, its waters threading downward through one of the most extraordinary landscapes on Earth. Flowing eastward, they feed the Kazinga Channel, that remarkable natural waterway connecting Lake George and Lake Edward, a channel so rich in wildlife that a boat journey along its banks is considered one of the finest game viewing experiences in all of Africa, with hippos submerged along its shores, buffalo drinking at its edges, and fish eagles calling from the trees above. From Lake Edward, the waters continue their obedient journey northward along the Semliki River, passing through the remote and ancient Semliki Valley, before emptying into Lake Albert. And from Lake Albert, they join the Albert Nile, flowing steadily onward towards Sudan and Egypt, until at last they reach their appointed place, the Mediterranean Sea. A journey of thousands of kilometers, begun on a misty Rwenzori peak, fulfilling a word spoken at the dawn of creation. At Jinja, on the northern shore of Lake Victoria, something remarkable happens. The largest tropical lake in the world, a vast inland sea holding more than 2,600 cubic kilometers of fresh water, narrows its immensity into a single focus point of release. Here, at the source of the Nile, the water does not rush or rage. It simply begins to move. Quietly, deliberately, as though it has always known where it is going. And indeed it has, for God commanded it so at the dawn of creation. Even these vast waters, held for millennia in Victoria's ancient basin, could not resist his word. They too had to obey. From Jinja, the young Nile flows northward, wide and confident, sliding through papyrus-fringed banks and the green countryside of Busoga. But the land ahead is not flat, and obedience is never without cost. At Bujagali, the river meets its first great test, churning through a narrow rocky gorge in a fury of white water that has long drawn the adventurous to its banks. The river does not turn back. It pushes through and continues. Further north, at Busokoso Falls, the Nile announces itself with thunder. The water accelerates through a compressed channel of ancient rock, dropping with tremendous force, the spray rising in clouds above the surrounding savanna. It is a place of raw power, the kind that reminds the observer that what they are witnessing is not merely geology, but obedience on a continental scale. At Karuma Falls, in the north of Uganda, the river narrows again between walls of dark rock, roaring through a dramatic chasm before widening once more on the other side. Karuma marks the gateway to the northern wilderness, the landscape changing perceptibly here, the acacia and borassus palm of the savanna replacing the lush greenery of the south. The Nile here is ancient and unhurried, carrying the weight of 1,000 tributaries gathered since Jinja. And then, Murchison Falls, the most dramatic moment of the entire journey. The entire volume of the Victoria Nile, immense and unstoppable, is forced through a rock cleft barely 7 meters wide before exploding over the cliff in a plume of mist and sound that can be heard kilometers away. It is the most powerful waterfall on earth by some measures, and one of God's most breathtaking signatures on the African landscape. Murchison Falls does not stand alone. Beside it, separated by a narrow wedge of ancient rock, flows Uhuru Falls, its quieter but equally magnificent sister. Where Murchison is fury, Uhuru is grace. Where one thunders, the other sings. Together they frame the same great river, the same obedient water, expressing two different aspects of God's creative imagination in a single, breathtaking location. Uhuru Falls came into being in 1962, the year of Uganda's independence, from which it takes its name, when shifting rock opened a secondary channel alongside the original falls, allowing a portion of the Nile to find a second path over the cliff. It was as though the river, in the year Uganda was born, chose to celebrate with a new cascade of its own. From the air, the two falls together are a sight of extraordinary beauty. The Nile, wide and dark above the escarpment, is suddenly divided. Two white columns of water hurling themselves simultaneously over the ridge, their spray merging in the air below into a single rising mist that catches the light and scatters it in fragments of color across the gorge. It is creation's own monument, visible from above as God Himself might see it. Below the falls, the river exhales. It widens, slows, and spreads calmly across the delta, releasing its waters at last into Lake Albert, and from there onward to the Mediterranean, just as God commanded. In northern Uganda, across the vast sun-baked savannas of Acholi and Langi land, God shaped a network of rivers to gather and carry the region's waters. Of all these waterways, one stands apart, the Achwa River. Yet before the Achwa completes that long passage, one of its tributaries announces itself with breathtaking drama. Somewhere along the Gulu-Kitgum route, the Aru Falls descend in a curtain of white water that cuts through ancient rock, sending mist rising into the dry northern air. Remote, unhurried, and largely undiscovered by the wider world, the Aru Falls in Pader district stand as the most beautiful waterfall in the entire region, a hidden jewel in a landscape more often associated with golden grasslands and open skies than with cascading water. The falls sit on the river Agago, a major tributary of the Achwa, whose confluence feeds the larger river on its northward course. The waters of Bwindi. From the misty highlands of gorilla country, where mountain gorillas reign alongside chimpanzees, colobus, and a rich community of primates, the forest does more than shelter life. It births rivers. Ancient trees intercept cloud and rainfall, and the water they release finds its way into streams that carve the steep valleys of Bwindi Impenetrable National Park, setting two great journeys in motion. The Munyaga River is one such river. Drawing from the forest's deep reserves, it flows northward, merging eventually with the Ishasha River, which empties into Lake Edward. From there, those waters join the great northward sweep of the Nile, threading through Uganda, Sudan, and Egypt before surrendering at last to the Mediterranean Sea. But not all of Bwindi's waters travel north. Some streams gather quietly on the southern and western slopes of the forest and drain into the Ivy River, and in doing so, they cross an invisible but profound divide. The Ivy is Uganda's singular river that speaks westward, carrying its waters across the border into the Democratic Republic of Congo to join the mighty Congo River. From there, those waters journey through equatorial Africa's vast basin and empty finally into the Atlantic Ocean. Two forests, one watershed, two oceans. The Ivy River stands alone in Uganda's hydrology, the only river in the country that communicates with the Congo system, that great assembly of waters west of Uganda's borders. Every other Ugandan river sends its load northward to the Nile. But here, in the cathedral silence of Bwindi's forest, water makes a choice, and that choice determines whether it will greet the Mediterranean or the Atlantic. Yet there is another waterway in this nation worthy of celebration. A river unlike any other in Uganda, for it flows in two directions simultaneously. This is the river Kafu, cutting its course through the ancient kingdom of Bunyoro, a geographical wonder written quietly into the landscape, yet extraordinary in every sense. In a country already richly blessed with lakes, wetlands, and mighty rivers, the Kafu stands apart as a river that defies the ordinary rules of drainage, a living riddle carved into the heart of Uganda's interior. The Kafu rises from a broad, low-lying watershed in central Uganda. From this watershed, the Kafu divides, sending its waters in two entirely opposite directions, each arm embarking on its own distinct journey toward a different destination. The eastern arm flows steadily and purposefully toward the Victoria Nile, joining that great river shortly after it departs the shallow, papyrus-fringed waters of Lake Kyoga. Here, among the open floodplains and wetland margins of eastern Bunyoro, the Kafu adds its quiet contribution to the Nile's long and storied northward journey, through South Sudan, across the Sudanese plains, and ultimately to the Mediterranean Sea, thousands of kilometers away. But the western arm tells an entirely different story. Known through much of its course as the River Nkusi, this section turns its back on the Nile and strikes westward instead, winding through dense tropical forest and open cultivated valley, descending steadily through the varied and beautiful landscapes of western Uganda. The terrain here shifts constantly, from broad valley floors where cattle graze along the riverbanks, to forested ridges where the canopy closes overhead and light filters through in broken shafts. The Nkusi moves through all of it with growing energy, drawing in smaller streams and seasonal tributaries as it descends toward the western arm of the Albertine Rift, before finally emptying its waters into Lake Albert. It is along this western passage that the River Nkusi reveals its most spectacular and least celebrated character. Threading through hills and rocky valleys carved over millennia, the river has sculpted a succession of rapids and waterfalls that tumble one after another through the landscape. These cascades are largely unknown to the wider world, absent from most travel itineraries, and overlooked by mainstream tourism. Yet every one of them rewards the traveler willing to leave the main road behind, willing to follow a dirt track into the hills, to push through riverine vegetation, and to stand at the edge of falling water in a place where few visitors have ever stood. Each waterfall along this corridor has its own voice, its own volume, its own drama. Some are wide and thunderous, spreading across broad shelves of ancient rock. Others are narrow and fierce, driving their water through tight gorges in columns of white spray. Together, they form one of Western Uganda's most underappreciated natural corridors. The most striking of all comes at the very end of the journey. The final waterfall plunges its waters almost directly into Lake Albert, barely 300 meters from the lakeshore. Standing at its edge, with the vast expanse of the lake shimmering beyond and the Congolese mountains rising on the far shore, one understands immediately that this is sacred ground. It is a last, magnificent declaration from a river that has traveled in two directions, through two worlds, before surrendering itself at last to the still, ancient waters of the Albertine Rift, exactly as its creator intended. While Uganda celebrates the Nile and its legendary source, elsewhere across this vast continent, other mighty rivers write their own remarkable stories. In southern Africa, the Zambezi River drains 8 nations: Zambia, Angola, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Malawi, and Tanzania, before emptying into the Indian Ocean. Along its course, it unleashes one of the world's greatest waterfalls, the mighty Victoria Falls, where curtains of white water thunder into the gorge below in a spectacle that shakes the earth and fills the sky with mist. Like the Nile, it is a lifeline. This documentary has been filmed and documented by Blasio Biekwaso, wildlife photographer, conservationist, and a man whose life's work has been devoted to revealing the wonder of God's creation across Uganda's natural world. A dear friend of wildlife in every sense, his lens carries both precision and deep reverence for every creature and landscape it captures. The narration has been brought to life by engineer Peace Mirembe Mercy, whose warm and graceful voice has guided us tenderly through every landscape, every waterway, and every living creature we have encountered together on this remarkable and faith-filled journey. Thanks for watching. God bless you.